international moderated panel discussion. Now, as we usually do, I think I'd like to, okay, I'll start by asking Professor Mary Matthew, who is the co-chair of this program, to welcome and say a few words, as we usually do at these webinars. Over to you, Professor Mary.
Thank you, Dr. Russell, and it's lovely to see, for a change, younger faces in our webinars, and we are so delighted to see students and the future doctors here discussing about their problems and their issues, the challenges that they face during COVID pandemic, and we have the world here right now. If you look at the representation, we've covered practically every continent, and it's really lovely to see all of you are so eager and waiting for this webinar. Just to tell you that the success of this program initially, when we started with the UNESCO, the backbone of UNESCO was actually the students. This program was driven through student wings of the bioethics unit, and they were the ones who took the bioethics forward, and that is how it became such a big, this topic of bioethics became very well known especially in India. I'm talking from the Indian perspective. But Dr. Russell and I have traveled the length and breadth of the world to many universities, and we have seen that it is the students who actually take up the cause of ethics. And it is so that you have a good future, and the profession, that is health profession and medicine, is assured that it is in good hands. So it's lovely to see all of you, and we are just excited and waiting to hear all your presentations and your deliberations and discussions. So for a change, I'll be sitting out on this one, and Dr. Derek, who is the student champion, will take over and he will guide you through this session. So thank you very much, and over to you, Dr. Russell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much for that. I just thought it's, yes, Professor Colonel Derek D'Souza, who is a moderator. He usually moderates the chat box. Today, we have asked that he's going to take the moderation, and Professor Mary will probably look at the chat box for. He's also in charge. He's the director of student training at the university, and so I think it's appropriate. But before I hand it to Derek for the rules, I want to acknowledge some of our important who are contributors and who are part of our program. Professor Ved Prakash Mishra, who heads the National Academic Program. Professor Neela Mishra, who heads the Allied Health Bioethics Program of the chair. And we have Dr. Arun Mehta, and Principality. Professor Principality is another one of the important parts of running this program. So,
Dr. Deborah and Dr. Lincoln are also.
Yeah, I just wanted to say Dr. Deborah from Brazil, but importantly, Dr. Lincoln Ferreira, who's I've actually invited him to be on your committee. He's the president of the Confederation of the Latin American and Caribbean Associations. He's part of our program and has been contributing. So I acknowledge and welcome all our dignitaries here who are generally there with us. Now, Derek, do you want to just give quickly the house rules that we are going to follow? And I am very happy that, as Mary has said, we've brought in of the whole world. Virtually, we've got North America. We didn't have Australia because I'm from here. I'm here, but and I thought there wasn't enough place. So I didn't worry too much about that. But anyhow, we certainly have the rest, most of the, or at least all the regions, and I think that all our programs have always been that we bring the world together, because underneath this is solidarity and cooperation. And you're going to see, all of you, many of the students who are here will see that a part of what we're doing is solidarity and cooperation. And you'll see this group, how the next few things that are going are there already for the student program. So Derek, before I introduce the others, can I hand it over to you?
Yes, Dr. Russell, good evening. I've got big shoes to fill because Dr. Mary Matthew does such an amazing job that I can sit back and relax and just look at the chat box and pass those messages. But being there in the spotlight is something she does so effortlessly, and yet every webinar goes off so well. So I just hope I can do some justice to this. Of course, it's wonderful to be with all the young and smiling faces. And literally, I can see they're bubbling with energy. Wilson is about to jump out of the screen, literally all the way from Indonesia. Ronak has a big smile on her face, and everyone else. So really looking forward to a very exciting time. Like I said, we invite all our students and even the faculty who are here to please put in your questions or comments into the chat box, which is open for all of you. And our panelists and even our keynote speakers are requested to please visit the chat box from time to time. And in case you can address the questions, or you would like to comment, or maybe even share some documents or share your experiences that are specific to the questions out there, please feel free to do it. So we have like a parallel chat, and even the students who are here from all over the world, I see, they also get a chance to be a little interactive. So even if we don't have too much of time to put in questions, at least through the chat box, we can do that as well. In addition, please note that I have posted a YouTube link in the chat box. That is the live streaming of this webinar. So in case there are any friends or colleagues or anybody else who is unable to log in to Zoom right now, all you can do is just forward them that link, and they can not only watch it live now, but you'll get a recording of the webinar there subsequently. So you can always visit it and attend this virtually even later. A small request, other than the person who is presenting or speaking, can I request you all to switch off your videos when the presentation is on? A simple reason: one is it doesn't consume too much of bandwidth, so we have a better experience all around. And secondly, I have noticed that it reduces the overall size of the recording that we will be following, sending it to you. So that makes a lot of difference. It's easier to share. So when you are asking a question or you're commenting, at that time you may switch on your video, and so we can see you at that time. And of course, please try and see that your phones or your devices are muted so that we don't get too much of background noise and we can hear the speakers or the questions very clearly. So back to you, Dr. Russell, for introducing our esteemed panelists and speakers for today evening.
Thank you, Derek. I also I had to acknowledge Professor Des Cahill from Melbourne, from the unit here. He does from RMIT, who's part of the Melbourne unit of the International Chair on Bioethics, who gives the summary every day, and also Dr. Arul Raj, who's part of our program from India, president of the Physicians of India, Association of Physicians of India. All right, so we're going to start with a couple of presentations. But before that, I want to first introduce to you One is Dr. Shiv Joshi. Dr. Shiv Joshi is a junior doctor, but he was the first, the president of the student wing, which was established maybe 3 years ago or so, when Shiv was still a student. He's now a doctor, but he has taken the ethics, bioethics in the student wing and bioethics to a very important level. He conducted the ethos conferences, student conferences, which are outstanding and great, very successful. So I wanted to introduce Dr. Shiv Joshi, and he's going to do a presentation. But before that, I will introduce Dr. Ronak Verma. She is also part of our program, but more recently, the Department of Education has established the International Students Association from around the world. And Dr. Ronak Verma is the current president or inaugural president of the International Student Association of the Department of Education of the international chair. Now, before I bring the presentations, I thought, and she has coordinated, as you know, we have the International Association has got vice presidents that cover the different regions: South America, North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and so forth. So I'm going to give her a couple of minutes to introduce the international program. And other important thing is that we have the Department of Education has been running for many years a certification course for students, medical students and students. Many batches have taken part. The last batch, which covered Europe, USA, North America, Asia, and so forth, all the Africa, just finished, and a new batch will be starting. So we will welcome all of you to join. This is with an outstanding international faculty that take you through, it's about 24 weeks. It goes for distance learning. So I'm just introducing that, and Dr. Ronak will have the link put in for you to, if any of you are interested, to approach the International Students Association. Okay,
Dr. And Dr. Russell Ethos as well.
Yeah, and of course, I'm going to get Shiv to bring that in, because he's the organizing chair of the of Ethos International. Okay, Ronak, I'll hand this to you for a couple of minutes. She has also helped to coordinate this program today. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So hello everyone, my name is Ronak Verma and I'm from the Datta Meki Institute of Medical Sciences in Varda, and I'm very happy to be here. I cannot begin without thanking Professor Russell for his constant and unwavering support throughout, and also Professor Derek and Mary. Thank you for believing in us. Well, the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics Students Association International, now known as the International Chair in Bioethics Students Association, was established in October 2020 during the World Bioethics Day celebrations of the now International Chair in Bioethics. It was a vision of collectively promoting bioethics, medical ethics, and health law among medical students, which was realized when 8 of the founding members came together, out of which 6 of us are here today, with Pratyush in the audience, and the other 4 already as distinguished panel members for today. Anna and Alara are here with us in spirit, as they are currently volunteering for the fire crisis management teams in their respective countries, that is Greece and Turkey, following wildfires during the last few weeks. The International Chair in Bioethics Students Association is currently recruiting institutional members worldwide, while also engaging in various research opportunities, capacity building activities, and of course, encouraging students to join the International Certificate course on the principles of bioethics and human rights. For today's theme, I'm very excited and I feel we have a wonderful opportunity to hear from the panelists and presenters on the ethical challenges and questions that have become evident during the global crisis. It is times like these when we begin to value the ideas of solidarity, justice, and equity even more. Yeah, so without taking any more time of yours, I would like to hand over to Professor Derek and Professor Russell. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ronak. Thank you very much for all your contribution, not only to this program, but to the cause of bioethics education for the students, because the students are the future. They're going to, that's why we are focused on the important bioethics and value-based healthcare to the students of who will be the healthcare providers for tomorrow. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Shiv Joshi, who's currently finishing his residency in community medicine. And Shiv Joshi, as I told you, is the head of the student bioethics program, the student wing and student bioethics program in India, but has been in that role building it for some years. And Shiv Joshi is going to, Dr. Shiv Joshi will tell you briefly that we have, he has planned, he's the organizing chair of the fourth international conference call for student conference on called Ethos 2021. And he'll talk about that. But more importantly, I'm delighted that he's going to be the first presenter today. And of course, he's going to talk about medical students as COVID warriors in India. And of course, it's going to give you a bioethical inquiry. He's going to approach it from that perspective. Shiv, can I hand it over to you now, Shiv?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm Dr. Shiv Joshi, and I'm currently in my final year of MD Community Medicine. And I am going to speak about this situation of how medical students were working on the front lines during COVID crisis. But before that, I'll tell you a bit about Ethos and Ethos International. So we started the first conference in 2017, and that is when the chapter also began in India for the students program. And we started building this conference up, reaching out to more students and creating a wave of change across the country. There have been 3 different conferences that were organized till 2019, but 2020 those we could not do because of the pandemic. And this year we have decided to do this conference as a virtual conference. And I'll be including one slide about Ethos and where you can find more details in my presentation, so that you can follow it and you can follow the website for the updates and also a social media account. So having that being said, so can I start with my presentation if you allow?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'll be sharing my screen. All right, so is the screen visible?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
it is. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. So today I'm going to discuss this topic of involving medical students as COVID warriors. We are going to approach it in an aspect of an ethical inquiry. So we are basically going to look at it. So the purpose is not to stratify and explicitly say whether what is done is right or wrong, but to put all the perspectives in focus for discussion that will follow after this presentation. So I'm going to format this in a way that we look at the inquiry context first. So we'll be talking a bit about the utilitarian philosophy, the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. Then I'll be discussing the risk versus benefit, and within that we are going to set the premise of what has been done in India and what is the situation and analysis for the same. We'll look at the ethical approach, which will be again based on ethical principles of what can be done, what could have been done, and finally we'll wind it up with some remarks drawn from the presentation and points for further discussion. To set the context, I would like to mention about the utilitarian ethical justification, which is often given to involve medical students or junior doctors on the COVID frontline. It is that to manage a certain crisis like this public health emergency, we need to maximize the benefit to the greatest number of people, which is the utilitarian ethical justification given to involve the medical students in COVID-related duties. Also, we understand that when a pandemic strikes, there are lots of uncertainties. There is lack of evidence there is a lack of evidence, and also there is inherent urgency that we need to do something. And amidst all this, it may often lead to approval of public measures without adequate ethical analysis. We'll be basing our inquiry on Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, and specifically this articles I've outlined here. Article number 3, which deals with human dignity and human rights. Article number 4, benefit and harm. Article number 5, autonomy and individual responsibility. Article 8, that is respect for human vulnerability and personal integrity. Article 18, that deals with decision making and addressing bioethical issues. And Article 20, that deals with the risk assessment and management. Now, to set the context, first let's talk about what has happened in India. So this is an article coming from the Economic Times, and it was recently announced in May, the month of May 2021, by a Prime Minister who took some important decisions to allow deployment of final year MBBS students. For those of us who are new to the healthcare training system in India, we first have 4.5 years of MBBS, then a year of internship, and then we move on to do our 3 years of postgraduate course in MD or MS, whatever we wish to pursue. So this is the batch of students who were currently in their final year of MBBS, who were approached by the Prime Minister to be involved in the COVID duties, as well as certain other allied health providers, including nurses, were incorporated in this. This is another article from Telegraph. Again, it mentions about how medical students are going to spend their time on the COVID front lines, as India's hospitals were facing lots of shortage in health workforce. And here is one sentence that I specifically want to highlight, saying, "We have stretched ourselves as much as we can, warns one doctor, amid a shortage of equipment, beds, and staff." So here we were trying to, as a country, we are trying to provide the health workforce to cater to the shortage of the health workforce, but at the same time, we do not have the necessary equipment, beds, and staff. We are trying to provide that too. In brief, I would like to mention the picture that that is there in India, and I cannot cover all the states as of now, but I've tried to cover some different states from different regions. So if you look at Delhi, the Delhi government also asked their MBBS students to contribute to COVID duties. But what is important to note is that they even asked the second and third year students. So these are the students who have not yet been allowed the final year of MBBS coursework. So even those students were asked to sign up for COVID duty. In July 2020, that is way beyond the Prime Minister's announcement of involving the final year MBBS students, but Gujarat already deployed their final year MBBS students to report for COVID-19 duties. And what is important to note here is that students in Gujarat were threatened with debarment from university examinations and were sent show cause notices under Section 188 of Indian Penal Code and Disaster Management Act of 2005, that if they did not report to the colleges, then they may get suspended. Yet even after working for a few months, they are yet to receive the promised stipend of a meager amount of rupees 500 per day. That is around $6.73 per day. Again, if you look at Karnataka, the final year MBBS students there in multiple private colleges, and those pursuing internships were again asked to report to fever clinics or the COVID-19 care centers on a very short notice. If we look at Maharashtra, which was one of the very severely affected regions of India, the Maharashtra government committed rupees 50 lakhs in insurance for doctors who got basically any doctor, including the junior doctors and medical students who were employed on the front line. If they got COVID, they would receive this money as insurance in terms of their treatment. And an amount of 30,000 rupees was given as remuneration, and free accommodation was promised. So there were lots of things that were sort of promised to the medical undergraduates as well as the junior doctors. But we have seen that there were delays. There was a delay in giving the salaries, as well as the accommodation was inadequate, some even leading to protests, which led to no resolution of issues. Many students across India have had to make their own arrangements for accommodation while providing COVID duties. Also, they had to pay for their treatment if they tested positive for COVID-19. As well as if they go to privately operated testing facilities, they also had to pay the expenses that they incurred out of their own pockets. So this is a situation in brief when we talk about involvement of medical students or junior doctors in the COVID-19 crisis. Now, when we always whenever we try to justify or rationalize a decision, we need to understand the risk and benefit. So there are certain benefits that we usually tend to see whenever such situations arise. So the inclusion of students may increase the health workforce. Of course, that is why it was suggested in the first place. It is idealized as a national service. So the Prime Minister gave something called as COVID Sanman. Sanman is respect in English. So for those doctors, junior doctors, medical undergraduates, as well as the qualified doctors who do at least 100 days of duty, they will get this COVID Sanman. So that is a national honor of a sort. And it may also provide students with unique opportunity for clinical learning, because this is a setting that they may not get otherwise. So these are some benefits that we can look at. But at the same time, there are certain risks. We know from the World Health Organization interim guidelines published in March 2020 that there's increased risk of contamination, which is inherent in being on the front lines. The current pandemic also does not allow for the routine training and medical education that was possible before the pandemic, and that has definitely affected the medical training of the undergraduates as well as the postgraduate or the junior doctors. According to countries, different acts, legislatures, providing services has become mandatory for students, and it is considered more of an obligation as compared to volunteerism. So it somehow undermines the individual liberties and disregards the autonomy and violates Articles 3 and 5 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which deal in human dignity and individual responsibilities. So given all this context and understanding what has happened, can we or could we look at it with a lens of bioethics? So it would be nice to have a detailed analysis of the risk-benefit ratio, and this has to be grounded on deliberations, which happens as a series of risk mitigation measures, and where medical students are also involved as one of the stakeholders in deciding these approaches. And this is very well defended under the Articles 8 and 18 of the Universal Declaration, under respect for human vulnerability and personal integrity, as well as decision making and addressing bioethical issues. We also need to understand that though it is important to maximize the benefit to the greatest number of people when we look at the utilitarian approach, but we also must understand that the same approach also means that we also have to measure all the consequences of the actions which need to be evaluated prior to their implementation for the potential risks. And an attempt must be made to minimize these harms before such approaches are implemented, which are again protected by this particular approach is protected and defended by the Articles 4 and 20 of the Universal Declaration, which deals with the Article 4, which deals with the benefit and harm, and the Article 20 that deals with risk assessment and management. Also, we need to understand that there can be various alternatives to direct assistance to patients, and this also needs to be evaluated. Some of them could be creation of digital content to educate the medical community as well as the general public. There have been lots of incidences of misinformation that was spread, and WHO also led the drive against infodemic, which was a new term coined during this pandemic. Something that was spread due to dissemination of fake news. So the role of medical students could be also utilized in development of platforms with up-to-date scientific evidence and social networks for dissemination of news. In this way, we can combat the fake news and the infodemic. We can also utilize this resource, this human resource, to collaborate with management and regulatory teams to develop safety protocols and to train professionals in the proper use of PPE. So these are just some ideas, but the main highlight or the baseline remains that we need to approach the situations with ethical perspectives, because certain times we tend to neglect the ethical analysis of such public health measures, but it might have very long-term measures if we look back at it. The conclusion I want to draw from this is that we need to understand that the adopted measures need to be structured, and we need to understand and take advantage of the students' existing capabilities. But at the same time, we also need to understand their limitations, vulnerabilities, and freedoms. And as I mentioned, any decisions made in the context of medical students, junior doctors, and their training can often have far-reaching implications for these individuals, their patients, as well as the communities. Before I end the presentation, I would like to extend this invitation to Ethos 2021. We have coming soon posters released out, and we are updating our conference website, which is www.ethosibmrc.com. You can also scan this QR code to follow our Facebook page, which goes by Ethos Official. And in Ethos Official, the ETH 0S is used, and then official is there. So this is our Facebook page. The QR code will take you to there if you want to go. I request all of you to follow the conference updates, and we'll soon be releasing our registration portals, as well as the abstract submissions will begin soon. We expect to have students from across the globe. We have been collaborating, and we've also formed an international team of student organizers for the conference. I'm chairing the conference, and with the guidance of Professor Russell, Professor Mary Matthew, Colonel Dr. Derek D'Souza sir, and with the help of my entire team of the Indian program, as well as with help of Ronak, we are trying to put together an event where we can have an excellent discussion and deliberation on various topics pertaining to bioethics, and to bring the academia as well as people working in the field together to discuss the issues. Thank you. With this, I would just like to end by saying that bioethics is a direction. It is not just a philosophy, and it has practical implications that we may ignore at first, but ultimately reflect upon to see what went wrong. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Shiv, for that excellent presentation, particularly bringing the ethical inquiry into the medical students as COVID warriors from an Indian perspective, and also for the conference that you're putting together. Okay, that was wonderful, and we will now move on to the next presenter, and we have Miss Han Zhang from China. But Han is currently a student at the Johns Hopkins University, and she's going to bring in a very interesting presentation, Female Frontline Workers in China, a gendered perspective on medical ethics in COVID times. And thank you, Han, for, and also thank Shiv, because I think Shiv, you're on the ethos committee, and I think that's how we got you here. So that's wonderful. So over to you, Miss Han Zhang. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. De Souza, for the kind introduction. And hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this international panel discussion webinar conference and the International Chair in Bioethics for the kind invitation. I'm Han from China, and I'm a pre-medical student at Johns Hopkins University, majoring in Public Health Studies, East Asian Studies, and History of Medicine. Today, I would like to give a talk about the situation of female frontline workers in China, especially junior doctors, and explore how we can re-examine medical ethics in COVID times with a gender perspective. Earlier this year, when I was still in the United States, I came across a viral video on the Chinese internet. It showed a team of female medics in China having their heads shaved bald in preparation for heading to the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in Hubei province, China. Many of them appeared to be very young junior doctors and nurses, and some were seen crying. Public reaction to this clip was mostly critical. The news media was blasted for humiliating women and using them as tools for propaganda. And however, similar narratives were found everywhere. Female healthcare workers who were branded as the beauties who go against the tide went through abortion, stopped breastfeeding, and even delayed engagement to rush the frontline where they're most needed. According to a nationwide survey in February last year, the proportion of women in medical teams dispatched to Hubei province ranged from 55% to as high as 100%. However, in the mainstream media reports, their medical skills, professional performance, and ingenuity are mostly brushed over, while the spotlight is directed to their physical appearance, motherhood, and wifehood. The narrative is not only discriminatory, but could also be dangerously unethical. Female frontline workers suffered from a severe shortage of sanitary products in addition to PPE shortages. And some hospitals even refused to receive such donations by dismissing them as unnecessary and unimportant. What was also being largely overlooked was the mental health crisis. Female medics suffered disproportionately from mental health issues in the pandemic as well. According to a nationwide study conducted by Dr. Shuai Liu and Dr. Qiao's team, female healthcare workers in China had significantly higher rates for depressive, anxiety, stress, and insomnia symptoms in the COVID pandemic response. Gender ethics is still at a very early stage in China, and gender awareness has been challenging traditional norms and practices in the medical field. Effective public health response to a pandemic like the COVID-19 requires gender-sensitive policies in areas that support and inform entry-level junior doctors, such as employment, education, media, and social services. Below, I would like to share 3 ethical lessons from the Chinese perspective that might be applied globally in the post-pandemic world. Lesson number 1. An effective pandemic response program should be inclusive and gender sensitive. It's necessary for response programs to identify and prioritize the unique needs of female healthcare workers for both physical and mental health. One of the ways to address this is to establish a responsive feedback mechanism within the program and to diversify the supplies for not only PPEs, but also female hygiene products and professional mental health services. Recognizing and fulfilling their unique needs, especially in a pandemic setting, is necessary to safeguarding basic rights and ethics in the professional sphere, as well as to improve patient care at large. Lesson number 2. Medical ethics is twofold. Mainstream studies on medical ethics in the COVID era have rightly focused their attention on ethical dilemmas regarding triage and equity of care on patients' end. However, ethical issues on the provider's end, such as gender equity in healthcare system, should also receive attention. It's more important than ever to understand the pre-existing challenges faced by female junior doctors well before the pandemic. Female physicians, particularly those in their early career, tend to get lower pay and less recognition than their male colleagues. That's an ethical issue that leaders in medicine in a lot of countries, not only China, fail to address. In the United States, for example, early career physicians tend to be deeply in debt after finishing medical school and residency. They heavily depended on their first real jobs to pay off their student loans. For female junior doctors, however, unequal pay often begins very early and persists throughout their careers, regardless of specialty, due to factors like negative stereotypes against women and maternity leave policies. Consequently, women working in the medical field had to negotiate to be paid equally, which is unquestionably unethical. Ethical leaders around the globe should use science to advance gender equity in medicine, especially for early career female physicians. Addressing ethical challenges on the provider's end will serve as a key to promoting ethical practices on the patient's end as well. Lesson number 3, education is the key to promoting gender ethics in medicine. In the early stage of the pandemic, the shortage of supplies of sanitary products for female healthcare workers in China was left unspoken and dismissed as unimportant. This was partially due to the lack of awareness of gender-sensitive policies at the administrative level across hospitals, which is often male-dominated. Thus, gender ethics should be incorporated into medical training early on, as well as continuing education for physicians through curricula like history of medicine, bioethics, and gender studies. Learning how to create a gender-sensitive and gender-responsive professional environment should be an essential part of what medical education should be, not just a luxury, but foundational. Given the differences in biological, psychological, and sociocultural characteristics that may contribute to vulnerability of women healthcare workers, particularly those in their early careers, it's necessary to understand the gendered experience of medical providers during the COVID pandemic response globally, in order to develop targeted strategies to better deal with these problems. I personally believe that this pandemic will be an opportunity for change for the gender landscape of medical ethics in China and around the globe. Thank you again, and I wish all of you in the audience members will enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you again for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Han Zheng. Thank you very much for that insight, important insight into not just, well, you've given China, the perspective from China, but probably could be extrapolated to other parts of the world. The female frontline workers in China, a gender perspective in medical ethics in COVID time. Thank you very much, and I think that was a important insight from. Okay, now we'll go on to the next presentation. Today we have Dr. Jason Fang, who is from the United States. I think he's from Texas or so, and doing his residency. Again, Jason is the Vice President for Engagement at the International Student Association of the Department of Education. And I think, Jason, when I met you, you were also involved, you're also with the AMSA, isn't it? The American Medical Students Association?
I was on the executive board.
Yeah, because when I first, when we were inaugurating this association. And today, Dr. Jason Fang is going to give us his presentation on another important issue, and that is medical education equity, and it's equity in the pandemic setting. Over to you, Dr. Jason Fang.
Can you see the presentation, sir?
Yes, Jason,
Yes,
go
yes, we
ahead.
can see it. Yes.
Okay. So I kind of wanted, once again, I would like to, as the other presenters, thank the organizing committee and the doctors for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. And thank you, Ronak, for inviting me. I wanted to talk a little bit about medical education, specifically in the US, and the problems that are faced in the pandemic setting. I think in a COVID setting, there are a lot of challenges that we must face in this changing environment to ensure that there's equity for all medical students in this crisis, I guess, in that setting. With that said, I'll touch base first on just introduction. Like I said, there are quite a few challenges that medical education faces, including legal, health, various other factors that determine whether medical students should be involved in this crisis and how their education will change in this pandemic setting. As Sid mentioned earlier, with Indian medical students being responders, the U.S. has not yet enforced such a rule, and I don't believe they will. But there has been volunteering settings and experiences. One that I know was set up by Harvard Medical School, where over 500 medical students volunteered in their local hospitals to respond to COVID during the height of the pandemic. Fortunately, the situation in the US has settled down to a point where medical students are not needed to respond. But the new variants and future diseases, we must have a protocol in place for such a scenario as well. Now moving on to changes in the medical experience itself. Just to give you a general idea of what the US medical system, medical education system, students usually go through an undergraduate career for a bachelor's degree before they're matriculated into US medical schools. And medical schools in the US are 4 years. Generally, these are older students since they all have at least a bachelor's degree, if not a master's or a PhD before they matriculate into medical school in the US. For medical school, its first 2 years are basic sciences, where you're mostly in classrooms, and the last 2 years are your clinical experiences and clinical education times. During the pandemic, the first 2 years, MS1 and MS2 students have moved largely to a virtual setting, if possible. A lot of them have been moved back. There's talk of moving back the lectures to the classrooms, but in general, I believe the students will still mostly be virtual for your MS1 and MS2 students. And for your MS3, MS4, there was a temporary stoppage last year from the height of the pandemic in the US from February, March-ish until August, which have now mostly resumed. Although some places still have telemedicine education versus in person. One of the most, if not odd, but different things about the US is that there's such a variety in the medical school education setting, depending on where you are, whether you're a rural medical school or a urban one, because the opportunities will differ quite a lot. And one of the important things that changed was usually medical students in the US during their 4th year will have away rotations to rotate at different medical schools around the country to get exposure to the specialties they want. A lot of that has been disrupted, which I'll get to later, but this heavily impacts where US medical students go or try to plan for their residencies as future doctors. So I believe personally that in-person experience is absolutely vital to medical education. having that patient interaction, having the just being in a hospital setting and interacting with nurses, interacting with your medical team is extremely vital for future practicing physicians as the decision maker of your medical team that works with patients. So even having that practice for leadership skills and directing that clinical setting is absolutely vital. So some changes, as I mentioned before, US medical schools put a temporary stoppage on clinical training. A lot of their training has moved to an online setting, which obviously there's a variety of disruptions. And in a bioethical setting and ethics-wise, this presents with a lot of problems, purely because not everyone has the same access to internet services or to technological services, as Ms. Zhan has mentioned earlier. A lot of medical students in the US come in with a lot of debts, with a lot of loans to go into medical school. So not everyone has the same resources to get the best computers or to get all the supplemental educational materials that are needed when all the classes are online. With that said, also internet setting, some locations, if their home might have a worse internet than others, which might cause problems with testing, with listening to lectures, availability, things like that, which obviously presents a great problem of equity between the medical students. And also there's a lack of case variety, well, at least a decrease in case variety in the patients that we see. A lot of elective surgeries are still, or elective procedures or surgeries or things like that have not come back to normal in US hospitals. Patients are still reluctant to go in there for their annual checkups and things like that, despite the availability of vaccinations, purely because they don't want to be exposed. So we have seen an increased number of morbidities, such as diabetes, which is a big problem in the US, obviously, and other preventable diseases that being untreated or undiagnosed. Personally, I've even seen some cancers go undiagnosed during this pandemic period, which obviously is another problem for both the patients as well as for the medical students' exposure and learning experience as a whole. Another problem that gets brought up during the online training is obviously educational integrity. There was a case last year that the Dartmouth Medical School accused 17 students of cheating during online exams. This case was later dropped due to student protests and things like that, because the way they accused the students was via their online learning platform. Students were accused of accessing course materials during the test. However, because of the technological glitches or whatever problems there were, they found that a lot of these glitches were more technological than the students themselves accessing the course material. So as you can see, this is another example of the problems with online education as schools and students try to adjust to this new reality. Obviously, this was one of the first cases. It's probably not the only or the last case of this type. I just wanted to bring it to your attention as well. With that said, there's also some equity complications or possible problems with board examinations and residency applications. For example, just to give you an example, the US board exams are called the USMLE steps. So there's technically 3 steps and 4 exams. Some of the changes step 1 is basic sciences. It's usually taken after the 2nd year, or in some cases 3rd year of medical school. And then step 2, CK and CS is usually taken after your 3rd or 4th years, usually before you apply for residency. Step 2 CK is clinical knowledge, and step 2 CS clinical skills. So one of the major problems that occurred during the pandemic was that major testing centers were closed. So in the US, we don't test our schools for these board exams. We go to either a Prometric center where they fingerprint you, and it's a controlled testing environment. And all these testing centers were closed due to COVID concerns, obviously. And it took a very long time for them to start up again, because these testing centers do not only administer USMLE exams, but they also administer the bar exam for lawyers, nursing exams, the SATs, which is a college matriculation exam for US high school students. So these testing centers had to prioritize which tests they were going to allow and how many slots were going to be allotted to each type of test. It became a very big problem at the start of the pandemic. The SEP2CES, the clinical skills exam, which you actually talk to a standardized patient, was completely suspended indefinitely and won't be brought back. So that causes another variety of factors, but it was almost a $1,500 exam. So a lot of people who took the exam, felt like they wasted a lot of money. Now that wasn't needed. Obviously, expense is a huge problem for medical schools in the United States. Also, another problem was changes to ERAS and the residency applications. All the interviews were moved to a virtual setting, which is understandable, but that created another set of problems, which I'll get to in a second. The ECFMG is the certification agency for international medical graduates that want to come and practice in the US. Due to the stoppage of testing for step 1 and step 2, they had to make a lot of immediate changes. So foreign medical graduates can come and apply to be residents in the US, notwithstanding visa problems and things like that. Those changes including adding a language exam as a replacement for step 2CS, changing the different pathways depending on if you have practiced medicine already, if you're already certified in your own as a doctor in your own country. It became a very convoluted and confusing scenario. They're still trying to work through that today, but through my work with AMSA, we actually had very close contact with ECFMG and all their changes. So it was very nice to get those updates immediately for members around the world and for other people who wanted to come and practice medicine in the US. So the conversations with what I mentioned before, the testing suspension actually had a huge impact on medical students in terms of equity, mostly because students who managed to take the exam before the stoppage in the same year meant that they could continue on. For a lot of medical schools, you're not allowed to go into your clinical setting without passing the step 1. So there were third-year students who could not go into their clinical year because this testing for step 1 had stopped. And that created, graduation problems, and also residency application problems when everything's delayed, because there's a very strict schedule for the US medical students in terms of application process and timeline. So the interviews actually the virtual interview sounds like a great idea at first, but actually created a huge set of problems as well. It meant that the top applicants usually for the US, in normal circumstance, medical students accept only a limited number of interviews because you have to fly to the hospital to be physically interviewed. So that limited the number of interviews you can accept based on resources, how much we're going to spend, as well as time and scheduling conflicts. But because the interviews were moved to an online setting, the top 20% of applicants accepted, some people even up to 30 interviews, which meant there was a severe lack of interviews for your mid-range and low-range applicants. So a lot of those applicants actually went unmatched. This is a problem for medical students, but this is also a problem for residency programs as well, because a lot of your top-tier applicants won't actually, take up the offer or match with the mid-tier programs or such. So a lot of programs went unfilled which became a huge problem for SOAP, which is a secondary match. So there was another equity problem there because it funnels the top applicants to incentivize them to accept as many interviews as possible, therefore kind of causing a bottleneck for residency and getting the jobs that they need to pay off their debt that Ms. Don mentioned earlier. So, and ECFMG also had to make a lot of changes that had to go through being accepted by the US medical schools and residency programs, and also conveying those new changes to medical students around the world as well, which meant that if you had access to this information, then you were on top of it and you didn't need, there wasn't any complications. But for whatever reason, if you did not have access to the most up-to-date information, or you didn't know where to look, it creates another equity problem because the most capable applicants might not have been able to apply in the correct manner. Another problems in terms of equity I've seen is vaccine hesitancy or vaccinations in general for US medical students. We were lucky enough to have vaccinations available to us almost immediately as soon as it came out. But the hesitancy surrounding it also were the whole concept of choice, whether you're allowed to take whether you should take the vaccine or not, has become a rather controversial issue when it really shouldn't be, in my opinion. So with that has also filtered through to the medical students, obviously, whether there should be, we should give them autonomy for whether people want to take the vaccine, and also, of course, public health concerns of having medical students who are unvaccinated serving in clinical settings. This study that I'm quoting is from December 2020, so I'm sure the numbers have decreased in terms of vaccine hesitancy for US medical students. But at the time when the vaccines were made available, almost 20% were unwilling to immediately take the vaccine, which to me is a very high number. And of course, this study only is from, I believe, only taking account from one medical school and about a sample size of 300 or 200 or so. So it's not a huge sample size, but it does give you an idea of the issues surrounding vaccine hesitancy and information being made available. So with that said, so some of the quotes from the paper that I'm pulling from, as you can see, there's a variety of concerns, including politicization of the vaccine itself, because it was right around the time of the US elections, a very contentious one. People were afraid that this vaccine was being used for political purposes, the rapid deployment of the vaccine, whether it was effective. We've learned, like as I mentioned before, we have since learned that through numerous studies that these vaccines are quite effective, and the side effects are very minimal, again. And so moving on from that, something I mentioned earlier is the post-medical and medical education impact in the United States as well, in terms of availability. As I mentioned before, a lot of what you are able to do, or what specialty you would like to go into, heavily depends on your recommendation letter from the rotation that you are rotating through, or the areas of interest that you are available to participate in during medical school. As you can see for some of the numbers, a lot of students felt like they weren't able to access the specialties that they were most interested in, and that would severely affect them in terms of how and what specialty to choose. And I think that has a heavy impact on the distribution of specializations in the future, especially when the United States has a lack of primary care physicians in medicine. And even as high as 17% of 30 medical students, they would take an extra year in medical school because of this pandemic, just to figure out what residency or what specialty they would like to go in. So this has a huge impact also on location and if you're able to spend money to go to a different hospital to find those locations, because it depends on maybe the one that your normal medical school is connected with has closed or has limited rotation spots due to COVID. So once again, it creates a whole set of problems in terms of equity for all medical students. And so in conclusion, as I mentioned earlier, all these challenges, including testing stoppages and things like that, are things that both students and institutions must now face in order to ensure that students are given a fair chance and an equal platform to compete or to learn in this pandemic setting without putting themselves at further risk in the medical field. So I think in terms of this impact on medical education has been quite heavy in terms of and broad in terms of all aspects of medical education itself. A lot of students have moved on to using medical education platforms that they pay for, things like Pathoma or things like Sketchy Micro. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of these, but these are basically like external learning platform or companies that help you through medical school. And once again, that creates a problem of monetary equity also, because not every student can get access to these or pay for these resources. So we as medical students and as medical institutions should try to help and level the playing field for all students involved. That said, that's it from me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much for that presentation on medical education equity in the pandemic setting. I will now, talking about what you just said, we did have one of our webinars that were focused on medical education, and we had various, but I think we had David Barbie, who was the former AMA president and the WMA president. He actually said that time we were looking at different countries, and USA had not allowed students to, I think quarantined the students from getting involved, whereas UK had a different approach, India had a different approach, and Italy and so forth had other approaches. So we did have a look at this. Anyhow, it was very interesting. Now we come to the last presentation, and this is, of course, going to be interesting because we have Miss Daja Popova from Latvia. She is the vice president for the International Student Association. And she is not here. She's been caught up in a flight from the IFMSA, the International Federation of Medical Students Association, taking place in Panama. And I think so. She sent this, and I think her presentation is going to be medical education, ethics, and clinical practice in Europe before and during the pandemic. So we now moved from India to USA, and now we'll see what Ms. Popakova is going to bring us. So is that Ronak going to do this, or Derek?
Ronak is going to present, I believe. You can play the audio, Ronak.
Yeah, this is 7 minutes, I believe, and then we'll go on to this, what do you call it, the
panel discussion.
Panel discussion.
All right, I hope everyone can see my screen and you can hear me well. Dear professors, dear presenters, and active participants, thank you so much for letting me present on behalf of UNESCO Chair Bioethics Student Association International and present a very important topic for nowadays education. My name is Daria Popkova, and I'm current Vice President of External Affairs, and I'm sincerely apologizing for not being able to participate in the online meeting and further discussion. So that is why I will record my message to you and proceed to the topic medical education, ethics, and clinical practice before and during pandemics. So next. Ethics in medical education is a very powerful tool, which gives an opportunity to become a desired specialist without financial, social, and psychological demand. At least it is how it should be by definition. Sometimes very unexpected and undesired things might happen, like it was with COVID-19 pandemic. So in this presentation, I encourage you to observe the medical education before and during pandemics. This comparison will give us more idea of how the education has changed. Has this change been ethical to all who receive medical education? And moreover, is there any chance to improve current situation, and should it be improved in general? According to latest research data provided by many institutions and surveys, there has been a change in education starting from March 2020. Hence, all medical schools all around the globe has to switch to the online education. The main problems, according to self-assessment surveys and information provided by medical students, could be categorized in 4 fields, namely physical, academical, financial, and psychological aspect. In the graph, there is information from the survey collected from Jordan medical students. As you can see in the diagram, the main issues faced were psycho-emotional stress, financial struggles, and lack of physical activities, which in progression led to mental health issues. In order to understand each aspect better and to discover an impact on medical students' well-being, I would like to compare educational process before and during pandemics, highlighting each aspect separately. So let's begin with academical aspect. There was a study conducted by Jordan University evaluating academical, financial, and psychological impact. So evaluating their students' academical success, they have asked them a few questions related to their grades, teaching staff, and clinical rounds. So as we can see, 47% of the participants have confirmed that the teaching style during pandemics has impacted their grades negatively, which was most probably associated with the teaching staff. According to the survey, almost 60% have confirmed that teachers weren't technologically friendly. Moreover, clinical rounds and practical classes in the hospital has suffered as well. About 73% of participants of the study claimed that they felt negative impact of COVID-19 on their clinical rounds because of rounds getting shorter and getting less access to the patient, actually related to their rotation topic. If we evaluate financial status, and financial aspect of COVID-19 and its impact on medical students, we will notice a tendency where the student's household has suffered financially, where 34% of students couldn't pay their fees for their studies due to pandemics. Mental health was the biggest issue, and there won't be enough time to explain every problem it caused, not only for students, but also for teaching staff, professor, and university co-workers. If we are focusing on students' mental health, main issues faced were feeling of isolation, lack of enjoyment, and troubles sleeping, which are definite symptoms of depression, which occurred because all of us are social beings and we learn and develop our skills in smaller and larger communities. Unfortunately, COVID-19 pandemics has changed our habitual behavior, which is an explanation of mental issues which have occurred. If we observe figure 3, we can see mostly negative emotions which students has experienced on the closure of their institute. They felt bored, nervous, and sad, which is not a surprise. Medical studies are very demanding, and this spectrum of feeling could be felt by anyone, not only graduating in time of pandemics, but COVID-19 has definitely impacted it as well. The last but not the least factor, physical activity and habits. There was the study, the purpose of which was there was a cohort study, the purpose of which was to determine body mass index, physical activity, diet, sleep, as well as mental health. And as we can see, BMI has increased during time of pandemics, and that was also correlating with sedentary lifestyle, which has increased. If we compare sedentary time before lockdown, it was 448 minutes a day, and during lockdown, it has increased to 517 minutes a day. All aspects we have covered before has directly impacted students' life. Mostly this impact was not beneficial. Therefore, it opens space for discussion and raises concern about online education, of it being ethical, and if it's if we should develop some guidelines we could implement in order to improve the situation. The WHO was hardly working on developing guidelines and recommendation of schooling during COVID-19. So I'm very glad to share some of their recommendation regarding the change in education. The first suggestion was to keep schools open as much as it is possible according to epidemiological situation in the country. Another suggestion was to improve test strategy at schools to make the process more smooth and efficient, as well to keep track of student educational outcomes, providing mental and social support if necessary. As the last word, I would like to encourage every and each one of you to take care in this very challenging time, and of course, start with themselves, caring about your own physical and mental well-being. And remember that every action matters, because a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and see you soon.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Ronak, thank you for putting that. And of course, we wish Daja Popukova all the best. Now we come to the very important and interesting part of this program. And again, we'll have the Jason and Shiv representing India and the United States in this panel. I'll quickly introduce the other four other international panel members, or five others that we have with us, and we'll start with Dr. Wilson Widolko, who is the liaison officer for the Center for Indonesian Medical Student Activities, and from Indonesia, and he's based at Yogyakarta. So he's going to be a very distinguished panel member. And then we'll have, I'll introduce to you Dr. Lina Ardila from Colombia, South America. She is the Vice President of the International, for Public Relations and Communications of the International Student Association of the Department of Education of the International Chair. So welcome to you, Dr. Lina Ardila. And we will then, we'll go to Dr. Ocean Bell, who is a postdoc candidate at the University of, well, I to pronounce that, but it's in Czech Republic. But Ocean Bell is currently in Dresden in Germany having her placement, and she's going to be another distinguished panel member going to take part in this discussion. And so welcome to you, Dr. Ocean Bell. And we'll introduce Miss Frances Chokwu. Is that right, Frances? I'm sorry if I didn't get it right. You can correct me, Miss Frances. Now, Miss Frances is the Vice President, again, for Internal Affairs, and she's the Vice President from the African region for the International Student Association of the Department of Education of the International Chair in Bioethics. So welcome, Frances. And finally, I'm delighted to introduce to you Miss Rashmi Rameshankar, who is from the United Kingdom. She's from the University of East Anglia in Norwich. And she, of course, is another distinguished panel member, and she has an involvement with the Department of Education's ongoing some research work, a research project that she's been helping and involved with. So welcome to you, Mr. Rashmi Rameshankar. So I'll now hand it over to Professor Colonel Derek D'Souza, who is going to be the moderator for this international panel discussion. So over to you, Derek.
Thank you, Dr. Russell, and thank you for all the wonderful presentations, dear students from all over the world. Absolutely outstanding, not just in terms of the presentations themselves, but in terms of the content and in the very short time that unfortunately we had to give you. I think you all laid a wonderful foundation and gave us an oversight of what the issues were. So we'll just try and pick up on some of those issues and see if there were any specific areas that there were some problems or there were some concerns. And I'd like to know what was done locally, because we've moved out quite a bit. We've seen those dark days of early 1920 when the situation was quite bad, as Shiv Joshi said. But today we are in a position where we are fairly comfortable on one hand, and I think we've learned from our experiences. So I'd like to have that sort of a perspective as well from all our panelists. And again, a short reminder to those who are not actually speaking. I think there's a very interesting chat going on in the chat box as well, a lot of comments, a lot of appreciation. So maybe you all can also share your ideas there as well. I request all the panelists only to keep your videos on, please, so that it becomes easy to connect you all in the discussion and we don't miss out on anyone. So I'll start with Wilson because he was the early bird. So he gets the worm of being first with the spotlight. So Wilson, what has been your experience in Indonesia? And also I'd like to know, as a part of CIMSA, what steps were taken to protect the rights of the students or improve their condition or make things easy? Wilson.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. My name is Wilson Widalko from CIMSA. I'm currently a fourth-year medical student in Universitas Gadjah Mada and a licensed officers in CIMSA. For CIMSA, we actually, for the COVID-19 mitigations, we did a lot of national level campaigns and also we collaborate with UNICEF also in terms of mental health for students, not only medical students, but also students in general. And for COVID, we also do a lot of national campaign webinars, and currently we are helping our government in tracing the COVID-19 cases as it's still rising up until now. And and we are still empowering a lot of members in our locals to act in online setting, and we stop all our movement in on offline setting. So we moved to the online setting for everything, but we are still playing an active part in empowering medical students to improve conditions health through our core programs, advocacy, research, activities, and also capacity building. So yeah, that's what CIMSA has been doing for the past year.
Were the medical students under pressure to join the COVID programs in some way, and probably the final years or maybe the interns were drafted? So what was their experience like?
Oh yeah, so there are actually a lot of news about speeding up the process of medical school so we can produce more doctors due to the shortage of doctors in Indonesia right now. But for the COVID-19 activities that we held, they're absolutely voluntary. We empower them and to join our movement without any in their consents, and yeah, it's totally voluntary and they're happy to do so. And actually we are currently opening another COVID response teams, and currently we have 60 applicants applying for that response team.
Thank you for that, Wilson. Good to know of those initiatives, and if we have time, I'll come back to you with a follow-up. I'll come to Lena. Lena, are you a doctor or are you a medical student? Have you graduated? Which
not
year?
the third
Which year,
year.
Lena? Third year. Okay. You said third year?
Third year.
Was third year. Okay. So what were your experiences? I think you all must have had online teaching as well. How were your faculty prepared, and as students, what were your experiences, or what were your feelings with everything that went on?
Yeah. First of all, hi everyone. My name is Lina Ardila. I'm from Colombia. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation and the speakers for all the presentations. The situation in my personal case in Colombia, I studied in a public university, and the arrival of the pandemic of COVID-19 came by surprise and interrupted like all the activities abruptly. Something that which the university was not fully prepared to have, like virtual classes and to use all the like the TICs and all the tools to have like telecommunications and that. So I think that was the most challenge part for the pandemic, because that's why the first months of the pandemic the virtually, which were also critical times in public health in my country. There were many restrictions, especially for mobility, to go to hospitals, to go to university. So I think that there were many conditions that interrupt the learning, like not knowing how to use the TICs, or like living in a remote areas, like not having access to classes either because they don't have like a computer or internet or Wi-Fi. So the country eventually and the university began to provide all these tools to the students, because we needed like urgently to have like our classes. So I think that it has been a difficult situation, because I think that medicine is definitely not something that you can learn 100% virtual. You need to, for being an integral professional, you need to go to that practical part, to go to hospital, to see the patients, to go to the laboratories, and because that spaces fill us with the tools to complement our learning. So yeah, I think that we have like important lessons from the COVID-19, because Latin America or Colombia need to like to strengthen primary health, and the universities and the faculties need to improve their tools to the students to have a good learning. I think that is important. Thanks.
Thank you, Lena. What about vaccination for medical students or healthcare students? Was there any program for that, or any priority given for medical students or nursing students, for example? I think doctors would have been given on priority, but was there any drive to include medical students, especially the ones in final year or just the preclinical in Colombia?
We have it, but in my university, we don't like have the opportunity to participate in that spaces. So I think that it's like the worst part, because we are not in clinics. So they put the students that are in hospital rotations like first. So I think that maybe it's a challenge for us.
Okay, thank you. But good to see you smiling despite everything, and that is the way to go forward. I think that human resilience has shown that we can still go forward. I still remember when I had to take my first Zoom class, it was really a nightmare, but I think today all of us are so comfortable on Zoom that we connect without a second thought. So I think there are a lot of positives to take on. We'll just move now to a different continent, Africa, because we haven't heard anything from the students there. So Francis, what has been your experience in Nigeria and maybe a little bit across Africa regarding medical education and also access to vaccines for medical students? Yes, Francis, you can go ahead. Well, I'll just a minute.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead, Francis.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to all the panelists for sharing light regarding this particular issue. From the African perspective with COVID-19, it turns out that the African continent was not entirely prepared for the pandemic, as was the rest of the world, but Africa is in a way disadvantaged because there's the economic issues. So while the rest of the world was able to move on as swiftly as possible, it was a lot more difficult for Africa with poverty, instability, and the like. Regarding medical education, at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was not really aware about what to do and the disease was ravaging the world, medical schools in Nigeria were closed down. And unfortunately, Nigeria, I'm speaking from a Nigerian perspective because I'm from Nigeria, we used to having didactic lectures, we're used to having physical lectures and facilities for internet access, facilities for e-learning were not entirely available, especially to students in the public universities. Students in private universities had better opportunities because they already had these facilities prior to the onset of the pandemic. But for students in federal universities, we lost a whole year. One academic year was lost because schools were not able to bring themselves together to start the e-learning, unfortunately. So medical students were at home for 1 year and lost touch with clinical practice because there was a long time that we spent away from school, away from our academics. And even eventually when the rest of the country started trying to pick up e-learning to try to give us some lectures, it was grossly deficient because clinical education is not entirely feasible to learn that online. And efforts were made to try to have video presentations, to try to have virtual case simulations, but it comes with its challenges because peculiarly with the African continent, you have to consider internet access. So internet access a lot of times can be very unstable, and in the middle of a lecture, you get logged out and you miss out on essential things. Mobile data is really expensive and not entirely affordable, especially the amount of data that Zoom and the rest of the e-learning platforms consume. We have even the lecturers were not entirely familiar with the platforms from the beginning, and everyone had to start adjusting. Electricity is not the most stable here, so you might have a lecture and there's no electricity for you to charge your device if you even have one. So you might also miss out on the lecture. And even the participation level, so students could just connect to the Zoom classes and be doing other things. So they're not able to fully concentrate as they would when in a physical class. So that was the impact of medical education has been really devastating, if I must say, because students are just trying now to catch up with clinical skills and try to just get on with it. But that's the African experience.
Thank you, Francis. That was really interesting. And I think in a lot of ways, there are a lot of parallels between Africa and India, especially students who came from not the main cities or even the metropolitan areas. I know a lot of them face the problems of not being able to connect, not being able to listen to the lectures, even though on some level, the teachers would feel, yes, we've organized online learning or blended learning, whatever you call it, but it wouldn't reach the student at the end. So that was, again, a concern of equality and justice, where we need to ensure that systems are in place. It's not just talking about the technology, but whether it reaches. I'll move now to Rashmi, because I think UK also had a kind of checkered history in the pandemic. You all went from being able to handle it well, and even vaccinations, I think, was going on pretty okay. And then again, all of a sudden, everything went into panic. So what happened to the students, and what was the effect, especially mental health maybe? How were you all able to see that students, your classmates, everyone were positive and get through this difficult time?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Derrick, for the question. And I would also just like to thank Professor Russell for the invitation and actually being awake and staying up here with us despite it being past midnight in Australia. So yeah, the question you asked me was regarding, mental health and how prepared we felt. Despite we think the UK being prepared and everything, I think it's safe to agree that no one was really prepared for this pandemic. The pandemic has caused disruption to all medical education everywhere across the world. And it's quite interesting that you asked this question because I was actually heavily involved in research during the first lockdown, which for us was in March of 2020. And during that research, I decided to conduct a national survey across, I think, about 227 participants from different unis in the UK participated. And we did this questionnaire, and it was found that about 58% of students felt that they were not happy with what is being done, and they don't feel prepared to become a doctor due to the changes of everything being shifted to online. So it has been a major disruption. I'm fortunate to go to a uni where from first week from medical school, I've been involved in clinical practice. I've been seeing patients from day one. So when this pandemic occurred, I was actually in my third year of medical school. So I missed about 5 months of my clinical practice, but it didn't make too much difference to me because I've had those first 2 years of clinical exposure, which is really important for medicine. Whereas I have friends from other unis in the UK that do your typical preclinical course for the first 3 years and then your clinical course for the next 2 years. So if you can imagine, someone in their fourth year of study that is just going to move on to their clinical experience and then having this national lockdown, which cuts out unis, cuts out schools. So that means you're missing 5 months of that clinical exposure, which means you only really have 1 year of clinical exposure before you become that doctor that's going to, help save lives and help with the pandemic. So that's the overall reflection that I've received from many colleagues of mine and many friends. But yeah, it's been a real struggle.
Yes, Rashmi, glad to hear that you all had your clinical exposure, but I think simultaneously there would also be the fear of contracting COVID among the students. Like anybody else, it's a normal human reaction or an emotion. Any experiences regarding that? How did the students face? We know there was a lot of tension and stress on everyone, and medical students especially being forced to continue with their clinical studies. There was no chance for them to, sit back and put up their hands. What about the mental health issues regarding the students, especially your friends?
Yeah, for sure. So I resumed uni back in September. So bearing in mind I've had that 5-month break, there was that anxiety amongst all students. What if I contract COVID? And not just ourselves, but giving it off to family members. And, we have vulnerables at the house. So that was the main concern, and especially the BAME community, because there was evidence in the initial lockdown that the BAME community are, contracting COVID more, and we've had personal relatives that have been affected. So there was all this anxiety, concern, mental health ongoing, but the unis have been really supportive. The mental well-being community have been really supportive. And the vaccine rollout has been quicker than compared to other countries, I think, from what I was listening to my other co-panelists. And so I've actually been doubly vaccinated now, and so have most of my colleagues, and we're not actually allowed to go into hospital unless we've at least received 1 vaccination and continue on with our studies. So I think they've done that part quite well in the UK.
Yes, Rashmi, that's good to know, and thank you for sharing that. Ocean, I've not forgotten about you, and in fact, I kept you at the end for a very specific reason. That being, I think during the initial part, you were here in India, and since you were trained in India as well, you saw the fag end of your medical education, how COVID took on, and how the students were affected. They were sent home in very short notice, and everybody was panicking because of that, not just the students, but the faculty as well. And I believe you were also involved with a lot of student initiatives, those who had passed out. And now the fact that you are in Germany and probably looking ahead at your future education, a snapshot of what you felt regarding the pandemic, how has it affected medical education? And now that possibly you're in Europe, have things been different there? What has been their experiences? Ocean, please.
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you so much, D'Souza sir and D'Souza sir for inviting me for this amazing webinar. Actually, I was so happy to see students and junior doctors being represented, because a complaint that we get a lot from students is that a lot of ethics organizations are more focused on clinical training or like clinical methods, and they forget about the students who are actually going to be the future doctors. So as Derek sir very rightly pointed out, when the pandemic hit, I was in the end stages of my medical internship, which is 1 year. So my medical internship was supposed to end in about February. The first way in which the pandemic affected the medical interns was that our internship was firstly delayed. Some of us had to take breaks because we had to go back home. And a lot of students, actually right now, I have a lot of colleagues who are struggling with the examination. If many of you are not aware of this, we have an examination for postgraduate doctors, in which all the medical students who have passed out, the MBBS graduates from India, they have an examination to enter into the residency. And that has been delayed constantly, and that has created so much mental health like pressure amongst these doctors, who are basically stuck in between this limbo of being a doctor but not really being a specialist, when they are actually completely prepared to appear for that. That, I think, is the first thing that has really affected this batch that has passed out. And also, of course, as the president of the Global Consortium of Medical Education and Research, I have been in touch with so many students who are right now in second year, third year, fourth year in India. And of course, online teaching, which has been very properly covered in this webinar, is of course very, very important, and it needs to be tackled effectively. I've been a part of about 3 studies. In all of them, we got the feedback from students that there has been some issue or another. Another aspect, because if anyone knows me at all, they know that I'm very passionate about research. Another aspect is that students' research experience has been paused along with the clinical experience. And students are facing so many problems in conducting research, in collaborating with other institutes, in obtaining ethical approval. And this is something that I was discussing with Derek sir just last week. And we are working on a solution right now. And I would love to get input from other countries on how they are tackling this ethical responsibility that we still do very much have in research. And then the third aspect, of course, is me being in Germany and then moving forward to the Czech Republic. Over here, I have to say that student rights and the junior doctor rights are very well respected. As this is a country of a comparatively low population than India and has much more strict laws regarding all of these things, I have to say that student jobs and student duties have been more well managed here, because I was also working in the hospital right now in the last year, and anytime there were more than like 1 case per 10,000 people in the city, we were immediately asked to not come to the hospital anymore. Firstly, because of the liability of COVID infection that we get. If we get it from the hospital, then they are liable for us. And secondly, also because purely they don't want to employ someone in that service when they are not full-time employees, they are not getting the benefits. So it is very equality based, and I really appreciate that about Germany, where all of this is promoted. And I really hope that India can adopt this, because something that I realized is because India has such a big manpower, they are always the first to employ this manpower instead of investing in other things such as technology to actually make healthcare more accessible. They are trying to send junior doctors and MBBS graduates into these areas where they are much more susceptible to so many things and they're not ready to take responsibility. And I think the only way to pressure the government into investing into more healthcare is when students start highlighting this. And that's why I really appreciate that Dr. Joshi highlighted that.
Thank you, Ocean. In fact, you read my mind. I was actually going to go and ask all of our speakers and panelists, because we've seen the various issues, but what have been the learning experiences? And if there is one point or one way that you can address the problems of the students is something. So I thank you, Ocean, for answering that and for giving us. So we'll now move to Rashmi. If you could tell us your one point of a learning experience or something, because y'all are the future also. Y'all are going through the pandemic. You've seen the pandemic, the worst of it, and today we are slowly climbing out of it, hopefully. So what would be one thing that you would like to do, and a good takeaway or something that you would implement or put forward for the future for medical education as such?
That's quite a tough question. I mean, retrospectively, now thinking about it, I think people in the future will be prepared because we've gone through this pandemic. So Zoom will be accessible to us, Teams will be accessible to us, and you know, making that online platform will be easily accessible to hopefully most people. Something that we need to improve. I mean, for people. Like I said, for myself, I've been involved in clinical exposure from first week on from uni. So that's quite a good thing for a lot of unis to incorporate. If you decide to just start clinical practice from fourth year, or, you know, like from third year, that might be quite difficult to catch up on. So perhaps that could be a thing that could be incorporated in more medical schools, just to gain that, because obviously medicine is a profession where we're dealing with the people. So we need to have that clinical exposure. There's only so much that you can read and you can learn from textbooks and look at lectures, but we need that exposure. And so that would be one thing that I would suggest to put out in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Rashmi. I think that was really well thought of, and it's something that is applicable. So let's all look for solutions. Like I said, we as faculty, it was a challenge to come up with new ways to think out of the box. And I feel in some way, medical education has been benefited, because a lot of times, and even medical practice, it took a lot of effort to try and introduce telemedicine, because as doctors, you feel, no, I need to see the patient, and we would look at the disadvantages. But when we were forced to adopt medical education, telemedicine, in medical education and in healthcare practice, all of a sudden we found that yes, it would reduce the burdens of the OPDs. It would ensure that maybe the outreach of healthcare was improving, and we were able to screen the patients who would actually come. So I think if we start looking at positives and start looking at a different future, that is a positive that we can take away. Francis, your suggestions, I know you said there are a lot of issues. Are you there? Francis? Okay, maybe she's away. We'll just come back to her. Lena, what would be, okay, Francis, you're there? Did you hear
She
my
says she
question?
can't unmute. I don't know, in the chat box I can see. There she's, Francis.
Yes,
No,
Francis,
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Your suggestions, or what would be one takeaway or a positive that you would look at to improve the state of medical education in the years ahead in your country?
Okay, so I think the country should be better prepared to take on e-learning. And I think one major thing that would be able to improve medical education is improving economic improvement, really, and providing these services for students. So some people actually have tried providing some internet access to students, and some lecturers have tried pre-recording their lectures so network instabilities do not affect the education, so people can get to access these recordings at any point they're able to. So I think those are the areas. Investing in medical education and providing these facilities for medical students would go a long way to help. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that is good. Lena, for Colombia and South America, what would be a good takeaway from the pandemic and looking ahead into the future?
Yes, that was I saying. I think that we also has this time for learning, like new learning. So I know to know that we need to do, like here in Colombia, curricular innovations based more of the acquired skills that the students has, more that, I don't know, like not only the rotation times, so more like the human skills that the person has, that so we need to change that mind of only has good notes and do a specific exam and pass the like the university. So I think that we have to change that to establish like new formats and to search new skills in the persons that are more important in these situations, like the persons that we're saying are speaking about mental health. I think that that's so important because we sometimes put the mental health in like apart, and it's important. So I think that we need to change here in Colombia or in my university or in Latin America, like they change the mind of, we need more human professionals, more than a robot that has all the information.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you. Thank you for really bringing that important area out. Wilson, your suggestions for a better future for medical education and your friends.
Okay, actually, during the past 1.5 years, our organization has also observed the willingness of Indonesian medical students to help their peers and country to fight the COVID-19, and in accordance with developed modules and open volunteerism activities. And actually, in Indonesia, medical school has initiated an open online course to enrich medical students in Indonesia with critical issues around COVID-19. Therefore, we encourage medical schools to integrate relevant courses, especially in pandemic mitigations, into their curriculum in the future, and provide platforms for students to volunteer to fight future pandemics while also considering their safety and well-being. In terms of bioethical education, simply put, we are shocked by all the ethical dilemmas that emerged during the COVID-19. It makes us revisit our medical education curriculums and leave us to wonder, are we equipped with practical skills to solve ethical dilemmas in emergency settings, let's say. Being first contact care providers, primary care physicians could come across any type of emergency at any time, anywhere, and that includes places with no hospital ethics committee to help us navigate through ethical dilemmas, or even internet connections to consult one. So my point is, in an emergency setting, most of the time, general practitioners are on their own, faced with dilemmas they never faced in settings foreign to them. And as the future frontliners in many emergency in many emergency settings, it sparks a lot of what should we do when that happens and what if it happens. And taking into account the ongoing climate crisis, the alarming rates of antimicrobial resistance, the non-resilient health systems, emergency settings will be the reality we will face regularly and more frequently as the future of health professionals. And we as medical students need to prepare ourselves. We need a medical education that can accommodate not only the current needs, but also the upcoming challenges we are bound to face. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson, and I'm glad that you all are taking the initiative to slowly change things and think beyond just the limited scope of medical education, but look at the larger picture and look at the future. So my best wishes to all of you for that. Jason, what would you do to something different, or what have you learned? What are your takeaways?
I think mainly it's just more standardization for, I'm sorry, there's a huge glare on my camera, but you can see me. It's just more standardization for the quality of medical education itself. I think we have a huge opportunity here because everything is virtual, everything, it's more consistent in terms of class times or wherever it is. And despite the fact that we're not physical in the patient setting, there are definitely, I think, broader standardization of medical education procedures or standards that we can maintain. So countries, even globally, can maintain even a stronger standard of medical education for all students around the globe. I mean, a lot of resources I know from Europe and US and, you know, even India have passed on through medical students across borders. And I think this is a great opportunity to even broaden that scope in terms of cooperation with medical students from different countries and doing things such as this, so that the entire healthcare system from around the globe elevates to another level.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Good to hear that. Han, are you here? Again, I'm going to ask you to span both China and the US, because you are in the US right now, but you told me, and definitely you would be in touch with students from China as well. Again, what were the difficulties and what future holds for your part of, or your experiences of medical students at Johns Hopkins, and again, back in China, how have they learned, or what have they done differently now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. First of all, I'm actually technically a pre-med student, so I haven't been taking courses at the medical school yet, but I can definitely speak to the pre-medical experience, at least at Johns Hopkins. So since I'm majoring in public health studies, a lot of what I'm studying is around global health. So it is a crucial part of the global health education for students to go to the fields and to conduct projects locally in countries of their interest. However, due to the COVID, a lot of such practical on-site programs are canceled, and they have to conduct remote modality. This can be both education can opportunities. For example, some more educations during the summer about and they're offered at a much lower tuition compared to their on-site programs. And this is making global education more accessible for students across the globe. And I have part one of such programs. I was able to meet with students all around the world without having to travel to the site. So I would say it's both opportunity and challenge for global health students and pre-medical students, but yeah, so I'm positive that the virtual modality will also promote access for educational resources, and as what Jason has mentioned, the equity of medical education as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Han, for that and for giving us that perspective as also something for the future. Shiv, you led us off into this discussion. You've had a lot of discussions, I know, with students all over the world. So the Indian perspective you already gave us. What has been the global connect, or maybe the essence of what medical students could look at in the future with a more positive light?
Thank you, sir, for the question. I think, yes, when we look at the future of medical education, and while I do not expertise in that area, but as a student, what I feel is that when it comes to studying anything, the most important part is the learning environment that is created. So if we are talking about imparting certain concepts, if we're talking about imparting the things that go into theoretical aspects of teaching, it might be very convenient to actually deliver it over the online platforms. And when we talk about merging or the blended learning where we have some offline classes and some online training going on at the same time, it might really be useful even to scale up post-pandemic. I mean, if the theory classes still happen online, it might still be a good thing. But when it comes to some core psychomotor skills that we need to gain as clinicians or as doctors or as public health experts, it becomes very important to get in touch with the community that you're going to serve. It becomes important to gain those soft skills. So whenever I talk with my colleagues from other countries, there's this common finding that I always get, and it pertains to the acceptability of online learning, but at the same time having a lots of associated challenges related to scalability of such measures, related to how each and every country can actually have similar type of access to such technologies while teaching their medical students. So that becomes a bit of, I think all these challenges, if we look in the light of the current pandemic, it has given us an opportunity to discuss and deliberate and move ahead and create systems where this can be made possible for most of us and most of the students elsewhere, India and beyond. So I think if we look at the global perspective, things seem doable, but it is the faculties, the students who have to make that combined effort to take things forward. So that is what I think. Thank you.
Shiv, all the community and public health training is absolutely showing through. and my compliments to that. And I think that was wonderfully summarized. And that is probably the way forward. I'll invite Professor Mary Matthew now to give us her comments, and she's been monitoring the chat and the discussions that have been going on there as well. But after that, I'll invite Professor Vatsala Swami from the D.Y. Patil Medical University here in Pune. And there's a reason why I'm going to ask her to share her ideas. Not only has she been a very experienced medical educator and administrator, but probably she's had the unique opportunity of overseeing education in the medical college, dental college, nursing, physiotherapy, pharmacy, Ayurveda, homeopathy. So she probably had a bird's eye view of how all these varied specialties. And when we talk of medical education, we also talk about healthcare education. So after Professor Mary Matthew gives us her views and her ideas of the discussion, I'll call upon Professor Vatsala Swami, ma'am, to share a few thoughts and ideas to summarize this discussion. So first, Professor Mary Matthew.
Thank you, Derek, and I've been listening to the entire session. It's really heartening to see. My heart goes out to all of you for what you had to face during this pandemic and the losses that you had in terms of education. I remember that when I was asked to send my postgraduates to the front line, I was very scared because many of them were already married and they had little children to look after. And then I thought, okay, let me send all the boys first. And then I thought that was so unfair to even think like that, to make a difference between sending the male postgraduates first and, then, but fortunately we were lucky that all our postgraduates cooperated and nothing untoward happened. But yes, they lost out a lot in terms of hands-on experience and training. And we are having a tough time to bring them to the level they are supposed to be at this stage. So, but we are trying our best to have more sessions, teaching sessions. And right now our medical students are coming back on Monday. We are still having classes offline, but practical has to be, we are having offline practicals, but online classes. But still, we are making all effort to ensure that they have not lost out on, what they were supposed to learn. And I think personally, I hope we'll never see a group of medical students like this who have gone through such a difficult time during their education. So I hope we are seeing the last of it. And I was really sad to hear what Hans said about female warriors and, what they had to go through. Actually, we never think about that. And, it must have been really difficult. But sometimes, even people in authority, their hands are tied. Someone has to be the sacrificial lamb for all these kind of things. And unfortunately, it is the students who are called to, to respond to such situations. So, but I'm glad to see that all of you are still positive and that you've come out unfazed and you're ready to face the world. Take it as an experience, take it as an opportunity, like one of our speakers said, take it as an opportunity and use it to move forward. Yes, you've lost out on research, but research can be done at any time and anywhere, and we can find ways of doing it. So a lot of my postgraduates were not able to meet the patients and continue. We had to modify their studies, but we ensured that they complete on time, that they will not lose any of the years that because of the pandemic. So congratulations to all the students. You've done a wonderful job, and it's really nice to listen to all of you. And when I'm sure when your teachers listen to it, we also feel positive and feel like, that we can move forward. And the challenges is not only for one group of people, but it is for all of us. So congratulations and thank you to all our speakers and panelists. And of course, the student organizers, Shiv and Ocean, and all of you who have taken this challenge to have this, to come onto this platform and share your thoughts. So good luck, and I'm sure all of you will do well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mary. And if I can just recount what we had a discussion on physiotherapy last week. And in fact, we had a student, physiotherapy student, who beautifully brought out this very succinct idea, may I say, and it's very simple in thought and easy to implement. He just said, learn wherever you can, whenever you can. In any case, we know that learning just doesn't happen in a university or during your training. We are all learning even now, even me. So if your training and your education is going to continue for a lifetime, as it is more so in healthcare education, I think just let's take heart in those very simple words of learn wherever you can and whenever you can. So whatever you've lost out on, you've learned in a different field. You've learned to adapt. You've learned to think out of the box. And maybe that is going to help us in the future. If Dr. Vatsalaswamy, Professor Vatsalaswamy is there, ma'am? Can you unmute yourself? Yes, ma'am. Good to have you. Thank you. I know you're very busy, but I said you have the bird's eye view working at the university. So
yes, Derek, I'm there.
yes, ma'am.
I've been listening to all the panelists, and I must say that each one of them have explicitly explained the challenges faced and how to go about it. But I must tell you, working in the university and medical school, our exposure during the pandemic to various challenges faced is really, I must say, it was very difficult. And moreover, the students, to see to that we are in touch with the students and see that their mental status is not affected. And I must really appreciate our faculty at D.Y. Patil, who were in touch with the students online, WhatsApp, whichever way they could see, and then saw to it that they attend the classes. And I must tell you, I saw the chat box, and they were saying that how to motivate them was a challenge. And especially the skin-based teaching is where we found it difficult to see that they have the hands-on experience, though our teachers and faculty have tried their best to see that it is done in a very effective way. But I must tell you, it is a challenge, really a challenge. And as I said, the new normal, we have to get used to it, having blended teaching learning process.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing those wonderful thoughts. And I think all the students can take heart in that. And we have Dr. Arun Mehra from Delhi in India, who also says that this reminds us of Emerson's immortal words, every man I meet is in some way my superior, and in that I can learn of him. And it's also very akin to what Dr. Russell tells us about learning by osmosis and this whole system of co-learners. And I think today the roles were in some way reversed, with us in the faculty or maybe the seniors learning from all these dear students from all over the world, looking at your perspective, looking at you all still remaining positive despite all the challenges. So as we come into an end of this discussion, I go back to Dr. Russell D'Souza to summarize and to give us his thoughts and views on this discussion. Dr. Russell, please.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for, and thank you to all our panelists who've taken us through. We've had a very, very interesting and indeed eye-opener to some of the issues that medical students, the healthcare providers of tomorrow have given us an indication of what it is and what it has been and continues to be dealing with a pandemic that we are currently facing. And these presentations were particularly important because we had a view from different parts, particularly focusing on the ethical issues around, and we had the opportunity to have a bird's eye view into India, into China, where she very nicely brought out a very important issue that we've all probably overlooked. And then we had the United States with Jason, and also the Europe from. So this is very important. And I take now one of the things I think before we finish, where we want to, I think, I don't know if Lincoln and Deborah, for all of you in Brazil, today is Father's Day, I'm told. Deborah tells me today is Father's Day in Brazil. So all of you, I do not know if it's also in the other Latin American countries or only Brazil, but happy Father's Day to all who are from Brazil, or for that matter, I'm not sure if it's also in the other Latin American countries, but certainly have very happy Father's Day, particularly to also to our friend Lincoln from Brazil. So Deborah, you can give our wishes to all the fathers. It's early morning, or it's in the middle of the morning for you, so it's a new day. For me, it's already in Monday here. Okay, so happy Father's Day to everyone, and thank you, Derek, for moderating this, and it was wonderful what you did. Thank you, Mary, for co-chairing this program and taking your part and giving your summary, and not to forget Vatsala, Professor Vatsala, our dear friend, who was there when we started the program in Chennai in 2015. She's been there with us. So, well, thank you all very much. So we had another, the 45th webinar has been a great success. And thank you to all the very, very distinguished panelists, from Dr. Wilson, Dr. Wilson, Vidal Kaur, then you have Lena Adrilla, then and Dr. Ocean Bell, Francis, and Rashmi Ramesh Shankar, and of course not forgetting our presenters, and particularly is Shiv, the president of our student wing, and Jason Fang, and Han Zhang, and also, although she's not here, we appreciated her presentation, Daja Popakova, and of course, thank you also to Ronak for your contribution in coordinating this program and putting it together. So I want to thank you all, and so we will.
I think Deborah wanted to say something. Professor Deborah?
Yeah, Deborah from Brazil.
Yes, thank you very much for this great webinar. It was an excellent. It's very good. It's very good for me to share our experience. And I just want to say that it's very difficult for us that teaches practical disciplines, because we have to put our students to hands-on. In fact, on hands-on, we learn surgery, practicing surgery. It's very difficult. So we started to learn with a small group of students, and it's going better. It's a hard work, but now we are alive, safe and well, and it's better. And I hope all you will be safe and well this week. Okay, have a good day for all of the fathers from Brazil, in name of my great friend Lincoln.
Yeah, is Lincoln there? I don't know if Lincoln is
yes,
still there.
He's there all the morning. We are all the three Brazilians here. Lincoln, I, and Karen, our friends of PhD from Porto.
Yeah, anyhow, happy Father's Day, Lincoln, and thank you for your contribution. So that's good. All right. So any
Dr. Joseph, I think, raised his hand. Yes, Dr. Joseph Philip Raj, please.
Dr. Philip. What about there's Lincoln is there? Yes.
Can you switch on your camera, please? Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Russell, in your name, I would like to congratulate all the audience and all the organizers of this very, very well done seminar. I would like to say thank you, Deborah, in name of the fathers of the group and of our country, and say that the problems are the same. We start to fight a war with all the problems that a war brings, in this case, globally. That means problems of logistic, problems of learning, problems of teaching, risk for ourselves as a health carers, and our families, and also politics that make a major role, as I thought, as I've heard from the very, very well done lectures. So this is my consideration. Latin America is not different. We discussed the situation not only in Brazil, but also in Paraguay, Argentina, Uruguay, and Bolivia, and Nicaragua. A lot of problem different from each country. Each reality is a little bit different. But when you take it as a whole, it's not so different from what I heard here in this, as you say, my dear Professor Russell, in our beginning, our Sunday. As you are in Monday, maybe you will learn what my equipe here, football player in Brazil, has already done. Please tell me after the meeting. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and happy Father's Day to you.
Yeah, supposed to play today in the afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Joseph, I think you can unmute yourself now.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. When I was discussing with Professor Russell regarding starting the classes from the undergraduate times regarding bioethics and human rights, and that time, sir told me that they have an active wing of students under UNESCO Haifa University. And today was the live demonstration of the excellent community of students who are so well versed with the human values, ethics, and human dignity, which as students, I was not aware when I was student. I don't want to say we. I was not aware of that much of human rights and human dignity. But today's generation, I think they are far ahead from what we were at that time. And it augurs well for the medical fraternity who will be the flag bearers for the practice of medicine with ethical values and human rights really, looked after. And I'm sure the future of medicine is in good hands. And I should also thank Dr. Russell for, taking care of the student community. I think this is where like the cricket coaching, they say, they start from under 14, under 12. You have really started well, and it really augurs well for the medical fraternity and the practice of medicine with ethical values and human dignity looked after. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Yes, we have always done this, and I have, we spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time organizing and helping them to get a number of programs. We have a course, a number of them, a few hundreds have been taken from Africa, from all over the world. So that's very good. Thank you, Philip, for that. And I think that's an important role that the Department of Education, all of us here are involved with students. And this time now we have a bigger, with the international group with us, it's much, much more effective. Thank you. All right. So then we shall, also, I think Jasna has joined us back, so we can thank you, Jasna, for your contribution from Croatia. And so this is interesting because we have people colleagues from every part of the world that join in on this alternate Sundays. We have been doing this since March 2020. So I'm very delighted that we've also now have in our thing, we have completed having the students also take part. So we'll go along and as we go through, so in a fortnight we'll be meeting again, and so we'll have this program will continue bringing and focusing on various aspects, various disciplines and their role in this pandemic, but importantly bringing solidarity and cooperation. That's where we all meet, and we're all in this together. We shall be coming out of it together too. So, okay. And so thank you all once again. So we shall come to an end now, and we'll stay safe, stay well, and we'll meet you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and good to see you. A lot of our regulars there. So thank you all for attending, and have a good day.
And you're all part of our program.
Yes, thank you for all the good wishes. Bye-bye, everyone.
I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Arul Raj. I don't know if he's still there, Dr. Arul Raj, who is part of our program, and also Dr. Arul Raj, President of the Association of Physicians of India. Is this? I could see him there. I'm not sure. Yeah, Dr. Arul Raj, are you there? Would you like to put before we finish, we'd acknowledge you and your contributions.
Yeah, he's there.
Okay, anyway, we've acknowledged he's also a unit head. He's got a unit in our program. Okay, let's wish everyone, and bye-bye to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week ahead. And thanks for everyone for being here. Look forward to seeing you soon in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye, and
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Derek. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Mary. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good week.
Yeah,
Thank
bye-bye.
you, Lena. Stay safe.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Yes, thank you,
Bye-bye.
Lena. And Ronak, we'll see you again.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you for that. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Mitra. Good to see you.
And we
and
always
wish you all the best.
We should tell Karen also from Brazil to wish everyone happy Father's Day in Brazil. Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.